checked in on what our current vision is based on, and we've acknowledged that it's a collective of everybody's vision here. There's not a CEO like you to say this is our vision anymore. We acknowledge also that the vision at ShapeShift even changed a few times over the years, but it still stayed true to those initial values. So we kind of put together, tried to paint a picture of what the current vision was based on kind of what I've heard from everybody, and also gave space for people to give feedback and see if we should evolve that vision, potentially abandon that vision if anyone comes up with an amazing other idea that we should focus on instead.
Recording in progress.
Wanted to give space for that, and also, of course, if we should kind of optimize that vision. And kind of where I think we landed is that we still have that vision of building the ultimate interface, but we kind of honed in our focus a bit. Trying to be the best at everything. We want to try to be the best at least one thing, maybe a couple things, and crawl before we run. After that, Ken had an awesome strategy session, and started off by having us imagine that we were on the moon and trying to think about, what big problems are we going to solve? What, if we look into the future and ShapeShift is big, what big problem have we solved? It's a really nice way to contextualize our vision and mission. And that led to a SWOT analysis. So we looked at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then after that, Scott had a really great kind of debrief and just gave us some very wise, motivational words. I thought really helped wrap up the full day. So yeah, anything I missed, you guys? Oh yeah, and so part of the plan was to get through this first agenda, which we're going to wrap up today with roadmap and crafted leadership, conflict resolution training. And then we have an idea for, these are all the topics that we put in the parking lot that we want to continue discussing today. And I had shown Eric that when he first walked in. So we got state of decentralization, the bounding process, partnerships, data-driven decision, how we're going to collect that and actually analyze that data to make informed decisions, set some smart goals that all the work streams can kind of commit to. That might be one of the most important things that in the roadmap that comes out of this. DeFi is going to talk about the philosophy of open source software. We're going to talk about business model and have a debate about fees or no fees, or any other ideas for how to capture value. And then decentralized app progress and how close we are to having a fully decentralized app and what that would mean. And if there's anything we want to prioritize around that. And I think it'll be a good discussion around, how much we want to promote that, or if it's the right time to actually promote the fact that very soon we'll have a fully decentralized, unstoppable app that anybody in the world can access. Yeah, and there's still some room, so we might have some more ideas like from today that we throw into the parking lot. Anything else? Oh yeah, if someone says something you like, snap. If someone says something you don't like, throw a tomato at them. We got tomatoes in the kitchen.
They're just little great tomatoes. They don't make a
All right, thank you, Willie. Yeah, that was a great summary. And so this parking lot items, I'd be amazing if we got through all of that in the next 2 days after the roadmap session. I think that would be incredible. Just to set expectations, we may not, right? It's up to us to build the agenda, and we'll have plenty of check-ins as we go, so we can move on to the next thing if we ever want to. We can also make the decision to do breakout groups, so that would make it more easy to tackle all of these, as if we divide it into 2 or 3 groups and then tackle them differently. There's plenty of space around here for us to do that too. Okay, so I think, Diggy, are you ready?
Sure.
All right, so we're going to do roadmap today. Diggy's going to do that. Then I'm going to introduce the conflict resolution process. And then we are going to create our agenda for the rest of the workshop after that. I don't think we'll get through all of that before lunch, just to set those expectations also. Yeah, I think that's what we've been doing, right?
Is there a Zoom also? Yes.
Thank you. And then, I don't know, each main and PCC or related.
What's the Wi-Fi password? It's on my phone.
There's a
Oh,
You're in the video, which is fine. You can just stay right there.
It's just a video of just Eric sitting in the corner.
It's whoever's.
Yeah.
Zoom.
Yeah. Me.
15 minutes, I'll have to be rude and go do podcasts, but I will be here the rest of the day and night. And I leave.
Cool.
It's not because I don't like what you say. We got one from at 6:30.
Metaphor says we're going to add the shadow band feature. It's going to be configurable feature.
And the Zoom links and announcements.
Oh, I can't see.
Hold on.
So some of these slides are already, some of these slides you've already seen. But essentially, just to kind of go over what we've identified in product as a potential 6-month strategy. And like we said before, focusing on 2 phases. And really outlined this yesterday. And of course, this is up for debate and discussion, but be the easy to use decentralized platform that gives users a single place to view their portfolio and DeFi positions while earning yield, swapping and bridging assets seamlessly between EVMs, UTXO chains, and Cosmos zones. I'm not going to dive into this too much. We already talked about the competitors yesterday. We've talked about our partners and integrations and how we can potentially leverage them. Slide 4, this one I wanted to show. So I was doing some digging. There's traffic here for app.shapeshift.com and private.shapeshift.com. And I just wanted to kind of cover this high level. You can see between August and October, I don't have November data on the site that I was using to gather this information, but we had about 75,000 visits to app.shapeshift.com in October, up from 45K in August. And private.shapeshift.com, I was actually able to get just some site visit information. And in August, we were at about 1.2K visits. And in October, we were at about 8,000 visits. So we are getting a portion of our traffic does go to private.shapeshift.com. And you can see the bounce rate there is really low just because that makes sense because people are specifically choosing to go there.
Quick question.
Yeah.
How does a normal person learn about private?
There's the primary way is when they come in and then they see the analytics pop up and then they can continue or they can choose. There's a link to go to private and they can.
And that shows the first time.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Yeah, mobile does not.
You're seeing. That's the main way. And then sometimes DeFi tweets about it.
But I wanted to show this because it was the only information I was able to find about it. And just to show that we do have some users there, but the majority is still using app, which is, at least if this data is accurate, which is nice. Our bounce rate is 17% on app.shapeshift.com, something that we're working on some ideas to improve. And then just looking at our traffic. So it's funny because Google Analytics for www.shapeshift.com is slightly different. It doesn't, which this is, I mean, we got to do a little bit more digging, but this is showing 7% of our traffic coming from Turkey, which is not surprising. Like crypto is actually pretty popular in Turkey, but I mean, that couldn't have all been me or myself. Just me, yeah, every day. Anyway, and then also I wanted to point out our stickiness. So it's a little bit lower than it was when we had the bounce after migration, but it's trending steadily, which is nice. So we are above 20%, which is considered good by industry standards. And this is a weekly over monthly. So this shows us that our users are, our monthly active users are using our app once or twice a week. And that's maintaining steadiness.
Does that mean it 23.7% of the monthly users are using the app once a week.
Once or twice a week.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a
Mhm.
percentage.
Yeah. Basically, that's probably about once a week. But maybe it's slightly, and it's starting to trend back up again, which is nice, but we'll continue to monitor that. Our goal is to get that up. And then that's one of the product goals we've identified for the next phase. And then again, I just wanted to point out here the features in Pendo that we're seeing that are the most used features. So these are opportunities, and they can serve as like leading retention indicators. But buy sell crypto is still one of our top. And then the trade page, since we actually built a separate trade page, is one of our most visited pages. And then Fox opportunities is on there. And search is surprisingly one of our most utilized features. And then I just want to go over really quickly a poll that we ran. So I went over this before, but again, so when we ran this poll for the next chain, Binance Smart Chain won in both polls, hands down, and followed by Polygon, and then Arbitrum and Optimism. And these are chains that we're also thinking to prioritize as well, but this kind of helped us order them. And I'll go into a little bit more about the chains and the research we've done around them and why we think these EVMs are going to be powerful features to roll into the product strategy. And so I added this yesterday. Scott mentioned this, the crypto enthusiasts. I think Willie said it too. I think that's a good word. Who are we targeting? We're targeting intermediate users and degens. And we went over this again the other day, so I'm not going to dive into it too deep. But our positioning right now is we're not, at least with the strategy we're outlining, we are not targeting the crypto newbie. One thing I wanted to show, and I did this based on a real user. So this is a user we lost. And I really wanted to show this because I wanted to talk about the why. And this is, so normally I'm not big on personas because I think they're too generalized and I think they can actually make the product strategy not realistic. But when you do user interviews and you can position a real user into a persona, it can actually be useful. And so this is a real user that we lost. And I wanted to point this out. So this is what he's looking for in his crypto journey. So he struggles to find good yield earning opportunities in crypto on legit products that aren't as risky. He's trying to find promising crypto projects with lower gas fees, not on Ethereum. And that's a big part of why we lost this user, because he doesn't want to do the majority of his transactions on Ethereum. And then using multiple platforms and wallets to access all his crypto is a struggle. I think a lot of people in here can probably relate to that. His goals are to expand his crypto holdings with stable assets that earn good yield and invest in newer legitimate DeFi projects. And then I just outlined some of the projects, some of the apps that he uses to kind of give an overall view of, the type of applications that he uses. But essentially, this is the actual user that we lost. And the main reason is because we were just primary Ethereum based, and a lot of what he's doing is in the Cosmos zones and on EVMs. And he is struggling to find like good, legitimate new projects in the crypto space. So I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so this is potentially a user we could try to bring back to the ShapeShift ecosystem. Any questions or any?
When was he lost?
Probably, I would say it's been about 5 or 6 months. That's a good question. He was really interested when we first decentralized and we had the fox farming and some of that, but he eventually, because I think we just didn't go fast enough for what he was looking for, he eventually just migrated off of ShapeShift. Yes, he uses Beefy Finance a lot. He uses Kepler, Osmosis. He uses Coinbase Pro. Yeah.
What was the first one?
Beefy.
Like a yield aggregator. They're on a bunch of different EVMs.
Yeah. Yeah, BSC. They're on a lot of EVMs. Yeah, and that's a struggle that he has. So with finding projects that are not rug pulls.
I think he represents a lot of users that we probably lost over the past 14 months, basically, as we were targeting DeFi users, but we didn't really we didn't add either DeFi opportunities, the ability for our users to even connect to these other apps with like Wallet Connect or anything, or other EVMs. If our target user was DeFi, we're missing a lot of the things that the average DeFi user that started to demand over time.
Yeah, and especially in the last bull market, like in the bull run, like gas fees got insane.
Yeah.
It makes sense that a lot of people moved over into EVMs. All right, any other questions? All right, so I'm going to jump into the roadmap just for the first phase that we've identified. I know some people think it's too much, some people think it's too little. We haven't done the due diligence with engineering yet to actually do the timelines around this, so these are just assumptions. So Swapper, I'm just gonna go over this again high level, and then maybe we can talk through each thing, and or however you guys want to do this. This is I don't want to be preaching here. I want this to be a discussion and debate. Savers Vault, we talked about that yesterday, and then Swapper, we're calling it 3.0, but we're doing the Swapper is now going to be able to identify the best rate across the dexes, and then be able to present that to the user. So there's some UI improvements that are going to happen there, and then we're going to be integrating 1inch because they also have the rev share in place. But besides those things, what we've identified is the Savers Vault. NFT support is on here because we are going to get that with some of the work that Kevin's been doing, right? And that's just basically being able to show the users their NFTs. Very simple. And the chains we've identified first are Optimism, BSC, and Polygon. These are ones we were looking at. So I'm just going to jump over into this slide. So I just wanted to point out here. So Optimism was third actually on our list of priorities, but they have a big grant opportunity. So if we get a lot of the work done by, I think it was like January 19th, we have a potential to get the grant. Is that?
Yes, the latest. So they have two different grant tracks. For January 19th, it's not for Optimism for our treasury. It's actually for Optimism that we can use as user incentives.
Okay.
We have to reward users and we can use that back for that. And Optimism is excited about that. So we're still going to pursue it. Then we can also apply separately for a grant through their governance. And that's we can so we certainly still can pursue those, but it's not the 250K fee would not just be Optimism for the treasury for that initial one that our friend John taken.
Yeah, I just want to manage expectations. I think 250K is what their governance requires. But we negotiate.
We're going to, yeah, 250 is what he advised us to basically start to ask at, right?
It's required.
Definitely not guaranteed. It'll be negotiation.
Okay, but if we want to get actual grant funding for the treasury, we would need to go through the governance process, like we're doing with Torchain or.
Exactly, and the January 19th is not the deadline for that, right?
Yeah, when the time is right, it's more flexible. Well, there's some flexibility, but I think it's also the case that we can get some kind of proposal next week, and that can be received well, and the opportunity to take feedback and perhaps get other round of deadline. So this really would hinge on bullet in there that says simple integration of swapping feature by and like we could go confident with that the general one, right? Okay, in the short. No.
Okay, so it's just center says.
Yeah.
If we did get 250K, that's like 300 USD. Price. That's pretty good.
Again, I want to say like, yeah, it's their government, the specifics of their governance is still emerging, but like he basically point out to share that like, you know, they have a requirement to open 250 for this type of grant. And it's like, depending on what you bring. So the council will come back. So
Okay, I just wanted to kind of show this. So with the help of PTT, did a bunch of deep dives into these EVMs, and they have seen even massive growth even during this bear market. Like Optimism has seen 1.7 million new wallets spin up with active transactions year to date. And then there's just some other information in here for you guys if you're interested. TVL on BSC is currently 6.62 billion. And so far this year, it has seen 97 million new wallets spin up with active transactions. It's magnitudes larger than Optimism. And then Polygon also has 1.7 billion TVL across 310 protocols, and year to date has seen 66 million new wallets spin up with active transactions. And they are still seeing, I think it was Polygon in November even, like saw a spike in new wallets. We weren't sure if that was accurate or not, but anyways, I just wanted to show that these are still growing astronomically in this bear market, and the potential addressable market here is huge. And then Arbitrum also, this one was really surprising to us. They have about the same TVL as Polygon, but with far fewer wallets. They have seen 1.7 million new wallets spin up versus Polygon. And it is, so I know PGG did the calculations, but it seems like there's a lot more whales in Arbitrum. There's a much more value per wallet than there is on Polygon. But we've identified Arbitrum right now, at least for phase 2. But these are, so we are thinking on the strategy that we do the 3 chains, Optimism, BSC, and Polygon in this first phase. And then we will get trade support, I believe, on all of those. Yep. And then, so that's like a quick win. And then once we integrate the bridging, so that users will be able to come in and not just trade, but be able to bridge between them, we think that's a pretty powerful product offering along with display DeFi positions. So I really think that this first, and then of course the snap is in there just to be represented, because it's almost, I mean, it's pretty much done. It's just in there because that's when it's going to roll out. And then the Wallet Connect just documenting that we need to do version 2. There's an update there that has to happen. But we believe that with these EVMs, bringing those EVMs, the ability to bridge between them, and then the ability to display users' DeFi positions across all of the UTXO chains and the EVMs is a pretty powerful offering. And I don't think each chain in particular is going to bring us the users. Even though there's a potential, I think once we have the ability to move in between those chains, to see your DeFi positions across those chains, I think that's really where that product offering becomes extremely valuable. So, and we've identified that as a potential as a 3-month phase. But yeah, I'm going to stop there. So then, I wanted to really put this part of the conversation focus on the
This looks like 1 inch. Yes, we can monetize it, but like Savers Vaults is probably something that they're seeing incredible product market fit with their on-chain. It's like, yeah, multi-chain. We've got all these UTXO assets that are currently unproductive. The only thing we can do with them is like send, receive, and trade them. But if the only way to monetize that stuff at the moment is kind of unique. Sort of like I guess we can. It'll feel like we can just swarm on Savers and stuff. The EVM stuff are not going to be as hard, especially with the technical work. It's done already. But it's just really the node syncing, and then if we're just doing base support like 0x swapping, send, receive, and they're pretty straightforward to add. There's a few other things here like that's not exhaustive, like I guess the display DeFi positions, not that, but like the work being done with the DeFi section. Like I think something we have to do is like represent things that are in progress as well. There's the wherever widget, like that's taken up some time. There's the DeFi section we have back, that's taken up some time. Having a really accurate representation of like it's like one of the most important things, I think.
So yeah, just as pertains to my thoughts yesterday about prioritizing rollups and this whole thesis that rollups will get an outsized share of liquidity and transactions and users in the next bull market. This makes me really happy seeing these priorities because optimism is increasingly popular. Arbitrum, I think, is like the leading optimistic rollup right now, and they're doing quite well. And that's super interesting about whales on Arbitrum. I wasn't aware of that. Polygon it's hard to say no to Polygon because they're getting all these big brands jumping on, and they have plans to convert to or at least start using a ZK rollup, which would be more decentralized. And then I mean, honestly, BSC is one of those centralized chains, but that I'm kind of bearish on. But at the same time, it's hard to argue with those numbers. There is a possibility that Binance could completely shit the bed in the meantime, and maybe the logic would change. But I mean, for now, that's kind of hard to argue. So yeah, I just wanted to add that because it does relate to what we were talking about yesterday a little bit.
Big plus ones. Really excited about the Savers vaults. I'm a little skeptical about putting fees on top of them, as you can probably imagine, but especially because it's one thing to do on a swap, but like people are depositing it to earn yield and stuff, and if they immediately see that their balance is down right afterwards, it's going to be not as good of an experience. And perhaps there's some things too, just on that note, like maybe it does make sense to not put fees on some things, even if we did add fees, and have them on other things, and provide some things as a public good with the hope that like, hey, if we can provide this for free and that will attract users, then we can charge fees and some other things, basically. That's something to consider. Yeah, I get really excited about the EVMs as well. I think it makes a ton of sense to focus on those first. I guess one thing that we don't really have prioritized in the next 6 months is any Cosmos zones after Osmosis. One other thing we had talked about there potentially is still giving users the ability, with the Osmosis integration going in, to trade for all of the assets on Osmosis. So even if we don't support Juno or Evmos or all these chains natively, we should be able to give users the ability to trade on Osmosis, Cosmos, or for any asset that's supported on Osmosis, which could be a nice first step. And if we see users trading for a bunch of Juno and stuff, then maybe we can make a better case to actually go prioritize the native chain. Yeah, I like this model. It's a little, when we did the vision mission yesterday, one of the things we had talked about was being the best place to do Cosmos and EVMs. And we won't quite have that in 6 months based on this roadmap, but we'll have some pieces of it. We'll have bridging between EVMs and Cosmos and Osmosis. We'll have support for Cosmos and Osmosis. And yeah, it still might make us one of the better places to do both, even though we're still not going to support all the Cosmos stuff. But yeah, I still think we have to cut some stuff. So there are some things being cut, but I do get excited about this. Still gives us the potential to be the best at displaying the comprehensive view of your portfolio. And then Fox Rewards, I guess, was one. I think we have that towards the end of the 6 month roadmap, right? So yeah, that was one thing that we didn't call out yet, but I'm excited about that because I think this is a nice set of features that we can expect to see some organic growth and be the best at some things without Fox Rewards, and then sprinkle some Fox Rewards on top to like objectively be the best. And I think it's as far as like what we can accomplish in the next 6 months, I think this is a good set of features that gives us the potential to actually be the best at some things and either validate or invalidate that. But I'm glad that, yeah, we're not just playing catch up and stuff, where we're actually starting to innovate and do things better than anybody else, which I think is super important.
I think I'm going to throw a little bit of a monkey wrench in our own strategy right now. So I want to talk a little bit about the Cosmos zones. And I just doing some dives into them and how they've been performing. Osmosis is obviously by far the biggest right now, or at least when I did this, it had 183 million TVL. But if you compare that to Arbitrum, which is like at 1.01 billion, it's much smaller. And Osmosis is one of the largest of the Cosmos zones right now. Juno, the current TVL is about 10 million. In mid-December, it dropped to 7.7. So when I did this a few weeks ago, it was at 10, now it's at 7.7. Probably there's been a value decrease there anyway. But it was up at its high, was at 29 million in September 2022. So it has gone down from 29 million to 7.7 million in 3 months. I just wanted to talk about this because I want to hear conversations around Cosmos zones and And this is why too, these are further back on the roadmap. We do think that the EVMs are a much stronger product offering right now based on activity and their growth, even in a bear market. Evmos, I don't know, we've been monitoring this. It seems like there was some fundraising done with VCs and a lot of them were just dumping. Current TVL when I did this was 3.8 million, down from 8 million a month ago. They do have grant funding. Secret, the current TVL is about 5 million, down from 108 million in November 2021. And they have roughly 30 dApps in their ecosystem, but they have taken a massive hit too in this bear market. So I guess I wanted to point this out because I think the EVMs, even though they were in a bear market, are still growing. Obviously their TVL has dipped a little bit, but they have it's just the value of the token. But in general, they're still spinning. We had a hard time actually just trying to figure out how many wallets are spinning up on the Cosmos zones, but at least what we're seeing with TVL and it looks like with users, they're just not seeing the growth right now that the EVMs are. And I know John has said historically, we got to be where the puck is going, but the question is the puck going there? And again, this is why this is further out on our roadmap. Anyway, I'm just curious if there are any thoughts around.
They're a technical nightmare to integrate with as well. Like with the EVM stuff, like I'm just being straight up. I wish Kevin was here so you could see his face, but yeah, with the EVM stuff, it's like 95% the same, and they kind of get forked and then tweak a few parameters, and you know, the wallet support's much easier via MetaMask and by a native wallet and by a key, and the tooling around it is a lot better. Like the node documentation is better. Things like Blockbook is better. We get, you know, all of the, we've now got internal transaction parsing, so we can get stuff like what Etherscan is able to show. Cosmos, on the other hand, is like a toolkit that you get of like, here's how to build a chain. And it's great if you've got skills like Chad Barraford and you're left alone to go and build Archeo. You know, it's the building blocks to go and build a chain from scratch, but the commonalities of that kind of base layer are not there. We've had problems with you know, like the data providers for it, like the wallet support for it as well. You know, purely my opinion is like in 21, during the, you know, the kind of second resurgence of DeFi summer, it's like all I could see on Twitter was people aping around on cheap EVM zones, just providing liquidity and farming stuff and playing in that stuff. I know Cosmos stuff exists. I just don't see a lot of kind of qualitative evidence of people using it. And then, like, to your point here, it's like the numbers stack up for the EVM stuff.
Yeah.
I guess this is something that I've been thinking about, not with this necessarily, but also how we're thinking about reporting and activity. Is I'd sort of like to see some normalization across these different chains of like one asset, because I think there's like common fluctuations of like macro conditions that sort of influence this, but then there's a separate fluctuation that will either indicate increasing or decreasing. So if like the general markets are down 80% and, you know, this other chain is following that, then we can assume those are relatively paired together. But if that other chain is down 100% or 90%, then like, okay, then that's definitely a shrinking volume, or maybe it's down a certain percentage, but it's a lesser percentage than the macro conditions. It'd be cool if we could see like a baseline or a base unit of value across all these different chains to assess like how much money is actually their money, how much like fake, whatever real token value, how much value is actually there based on like what we sort of care about based on a larger macro scale. And I'd like to see that sort of how we're also doing our internal reporting as we start to expand to more chains. It's like, okay, a common base unit of accounting for value of either growth or shrinkage can sort of help get rid of the noise that we might be able to see from some of these macro influences. So like the big thing I'm hearing with like some of these chains shrinking, it's like, okay, cool, it's shrinking, but the markets are shrinking. I'd be curious to know, like, is it shrinking more or less than the markets? And then also for these EVMs, of course, they're growing. That's a great indicator. So that's even better.
Like how's the TPL on Ethereum changed at the same time?
Right. Yeah. And then you like have the TVLs like side by side.
Does anybody have a sense of that from December 2020? From December 2021 to December 2022, how has the TVL of Ethereum changed?
Well, I know for these EVMs, for the other layer twos, it's down in dollar terms, but up in Ethereum terms. So I don't know. Yeah, I imagine.
So we know that most of these other EVM changes have been outperformed. At least TVL has been outperforming Ethereum.
Yes, the dollar value has been going down, but we're seeing more Ethereum
migrate
Yeah.
from mainnet to these
Yeah,
other
that's
jurisdictions.
compared to Ethereum, it's I'm saying outperform.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of a relative term. So then, but we don't know how to compare that to secret, right? The other,
Yeah, well, we can look at it. It is important to look both in dollar terms and also in the native asset terms, basically, because they can tell a different story. In the bear market, you have to grow 4x just to like maintain the same dollar term TVL. But yeah, I'll let Steve go, and I got some comments.
So we'll talk about those total TVL numbers and how they fit into our business model with like VIPs and stuff as well, right? Like, let's talk about the analogy with like idle, right? So if I think it was like, if there was $1 million, if we drove $1 million TVL into idle and we took 60 basis points, it's like 60K rev a year, right? So if we put 10 million there, it's 600K rev a year. Like that's nice. We're dealing with a chain that's got like sub 8 figures TVL. It's basically, there's no way we can drive that kind of traffic to it, right? The reason that people aren't using Secret or Juno or Edmos is not because we haven't done it. It's just like we're just not popular chains. So like and then there's like Arbitrum and stuff, which are like literally orders of magnitude, like multiple orders of magnitude higher. It's like we have to be playing those safety bets.
I fully agree with prioritizing the EVMs first. The Cosmos zones, one important note on the TVL is that right now the main TVL is like the native staked assets. And so even like Evmos, Juno and stuff like that, they do have like 100 mil plus TVL of just their native token staked. That's obviously causing like a lot of sell pressure in a bear market. And so the prices are just like, for a lot of these chains are down only. But that is important to keep in mind. We do have, with Texas stake, we have the ability to monetize just the native staking on those chains. I think right now it seems like we don't really have any Cosmos zones prioritized yet, or would it be maybe in the second phase? So we have some time. What I might consider, I do want to push back a little bit on the complications of integrating them, and I want to hear from the engineers on this, but at least for like base support, send, receive, stake, and IBC bridge between them. From what I understand, that we have done a lot of the heavy lifting already, and it should be relatively easy for us to add more of these chains on the base level. Let me know if I'm incorrect there. But even before we do that, I like kind of the phased approach. And I think we have an opportunity here to build on what we've already built with Cosmos-based support and Osmosis, send, receive, stake, and swapping. And Osmosis team's very excited for our experience with swapping, because it'll be better than theirs. And you won't have to like deposit and then swap. You'll be able to go straight from Cosmos into a swap on Osmosis. And we don't have this yet prioritized, but I think this is one thing that I do think we should consider. Is the work to enable user to go from Cosmos to any of the assets on Osmosis, and then provide liquidity to any of these pools on Osmosis, because that will give us a lot of unique opportunities. The farms on Osmosis are very healthy APRs, like oftentimes over 50% for providing like stables in Cosmos, for example. And I think that could be a nice experiment where it's a really great feature addition that expands on what we've already built. It's unique, and it helps give us the data of like, and be in a good position so that if we do see these Cosmos zones start to take off, which I do think, I agree with Kent's L2 thesis that that's going to destroy a lot of alt L1s that are just trying to be smart, general purpose, smart contract killers like Ethereum, or Ethereum killers that provide the general smart contracts. But I still believe in the app chain thesis. And I think in a multi-chain, if we do believe in a multi-chain future, I think Cosmos zones have probably the strongest potential to still exist and provide an alternative use case to Ethereum that Ethereum and these L2 really aren't focused on. They're really focused on being the general purpose. And I do believe there's still going to be space for app chains, and that Cosmos is going to win that. So I think, again, it's quite possible that Cosmos just shits the bed. All these zones are unsuccessful. That is a risk, but I also think it's quite possible that they explode and that they continue to exist and be a critical part of this multi-chain future. And that already right now, even if necessarily these Cosmos zones don't necessarily have a ton of TVL, there is a Venn diagram. There are users that are in the Cosmos ecosystem and they're in the Ethereum ecosystem, and they have some Bitcoin. And right now those users are underserved, and we could capture those users. And even if they're not doing a ton of TVL over on Cosmos, maybe they want to do DeFi stuff in L2s, but if we can have them using our interface, we can still monetize them and capture that. So that's I think a good healthy balance of like, let's not go too deep down this, but let's build on top of what we have. Let's get some good data and provide some awesome functionality, and then be in a good position to capitalize on that if the vision does play out.
I'm gonna counter that on like pretty much every point.
That's fine. The short's
In the backdrop of like limited resources, like the way Scott wrapped up yesterday in Focus, we have chains that are growing and have got like a tremendous amount of R&D happening on them. Like I get Cosmos has the potential to be an ascent ecosystem, but if you look at like what the Ethereum Foundation, their roadmap is doing and what all these layer 2 things are doing, I fully subscribe to Kent's L2 thesis. So we got something that's like showing growth in a bear market that's easy to integrate with, is stable, has good wallet support, good ecosystem support, has seen qualitatively like just user activity on Twitter and stuff that is being asked for by users. And then on the other hand, we've got something that's got like crashing TVL is difficult to integrate with, has poor wallet support, has poor data provider support. And it could have potential, right? Like something that they could grow. And I get the app chain thesis as well. Like what Cosmos is doing is a cool idea. One just seems like a 10x safer bet than the other. Users are asking for it, it's easy to do, numbers going up. There's so much, stand on the shoulders of giants sort of thing. I'm not sure if we're given the limited resources that we do have, why we make that like allocate many resources, if any, to the osmosis or the Cosmos ecosystem. If the EVM ecosystem, if we've got a choice between kind of like how do we focus and allocate our resources, it seems like not even a lower payoff there. It just seems like the sensible thing to do.
But do you agree with DeFi that maybe there is a diminishing return after a certain number of EVMs? So after we get some of these top EVMs and stuff, at some point it makes sense to then maybe.
Yeah, of course, there's diminishing returns. There's like, there's long tail EVMs, right, that are kind of garbage forks and, but I think that value capture wise, we go and get, we got the kind of Pareto principle, the top 80%. Like we're not going to get the long tail, but I'm not saying integrate all the EVMs. I'm saying integrate the top 3 or 4 popular ones first, and then we can like look at the Cosmos stuff.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, because clearly, at least based on this roadmap, no one's seems to be proposing that we focus on Cosmos zones for the next 6 months or so. So I'm not.
They're in phase 2, which right now, which is with,
So
it's a little bit looser. So phase 1 is we tightened up. Phase 2 we left very loose because we want to like monitor results.
Yeah.
It's months away, right?
That makes sense, but no one is saying prioritize Cosmos over some of these EVMs. So I'm not sure I'm following the thread of this discussion that well, because it just seems like we're getting away from the point.
Sure.
From my perspective, I guess a couple of things I wanted to throw in there is like, one, I definitely understand. I generally agree that like from my perspective, the highest priority things should be things like savers, which I have to mention is in the Cosmos ecosystem. And then getting some of these EVMs. To Willie's point, and something he said yesterday, I do think it is important to think about like what are things that we can actually be the best at. And I do have to point out that we're behind on EVMs. We're not going to be the best at that. Most likely, we can get up to speed, we can capture some of that, but we're not going to be a leader on that front. Or it's going to be very hard to become a leader. That's more of an uphill battle. One advantage of Cosmos is that we do have the ability to lead and actually innovate and be potentially the best in that world. So like, I guess I've been hearing this kind of engineering pushback and debate for a long time, like as far back as when we started ShapeShift, as like this chain is very hard to integrate, and generally that is the case. I don't think it's incorrect. But generally the new hard things that are hard to integrate is exactly where the opportunities also tend to be. So, there were arguments back in the early days of ShapeShift that we shouldn't integrate Ethereum because it was very, very different from what we were used to with UTXOs. It was very different than what the rest was out there, and it wasn't clear that it was going to succeed, but we did end up spending the time and energy on it, and then obviously Ethereum took off, and that ended up being very well worth it. Same things with Monero, actually, that took forever to integrate and things like that. And so that doesn't mean that every chain that is difficult to integrate will be worth it. Absolutely not. But a lot of the things that will, in retrospect, that you will have wanted to integrate are going to be different by their very nature, because that's where innovation tends to happen, is on something that is not just a copy paste of something that is already there, like what a lot of the EVM chains are. That's not to say I don't think we should add the EVM chains. I think clearly that is where a lot of the action is, especially things like Arbitrum, in my opinion, in particular, is where I think a lot of the most interesting innovation is. But basically, for the last couple of years, I feel like there have been two places in crypto where I've seen continual innovation. And that has generally been the Ethereum ecosystem and the Cosmos ecosystem. Cosmos is obviously a lot smaller. I think some of the TVL numbers are a little misleading, particularly because the only one that really matters in that is Osmosis, and no one is saying we should be adding like trading on Juno or through Juno Swap or something like that, or at least I would not make that argument. The only one that really does matter is Osmosis. Hopefully we're getting that soon. And to Willie's point, I think that it might be a relatively light lift to just enable the assets that are in Osmosis without having to enable all the other chains, and at least get data that way. I do think that there is a lot of interesting innovation, and there's also abilities to drive revenue generation that we don't have other places. For example, if we could drive people to not only trade, but also LP and then super fluid stake to the ShapeShift DAO validator in Osmosis, that is something that could drive very direct and increasing revenues that we don't have the opportunity in other places. And that's also an example of just innovation happening on Cosmos that I don't see elsewhere. Like super fluid staking is something that only exists in Osmosis in the Cosmos world. It doesn't even exist. That's not something that exists or can exist in the Ethereum world. So just from what I've seen, there is a lot of innovation happening in Cosmos. I do think that there's more potential there, and that even if the lifts are a little harder, that might be worth it in the long run. I would not prioritize it over things going on with Thorchain Savers. I think that is a much better fit for us. Although again, I will point out that I think that does have very awesome product market fit. We're talking, 5 million TVL on Thorchain Savers today. But that's also, again, where the opportunity is. It's getting in while it's still small and be able to grow with it. And I do think there is some similar opportunity in the rest of the Cosmos ecosystem, and we should be careful not to discount that, because otherwise we'll be playing this game a year from now where we're like, oh, Cosmos is taking off again because the bull market's returning. And I have seen a ton of just kind of investment in the Cosmos space among like VCs and other investors. They seem to be really, really interested in the Cosmos space. Probably because the Ethereum space is getting a bit overcrowded. But point being is we need to look at what we can be the best at and what we can be also early to, and not preferably late playing catch up. So my biggest concern with these EVMs that we absolutely should be integrating, preferably should have integrated, 6 months ago, but we can't for various resource reasons, and that's understandable, is we are playing catch up there again. Like, I just don't see how we're going to get ahead or not be like on the innovative side of that versus all these other things that already support those EVMs. So we can get some of that, but at some point we have to take some risks on things that are not clear, that are not the safe bet. The safe bets are we're always going to be playing catch up on it by the definition. Doesn't mean we shouldn't do those things. Doesn't mean we shouldn't follow up on that and go where the activity is, but we have to be careful that if we don't take any risky bets, then we're never going to be the best at anything. So we have to keep that in mind.
And then I just want to point out that I think both DeFi and John kind of made this point, but we have this idea of being a data-driven decision organization, and we're getting more data. And once we have EVM chains, we don't need to make this decision for another couple of months. We'll have data. If it turns out, I would argue that we integrate some EVM chains and Osmosis, I think we'll have, within a couple months, we should have, I don't know, it seems like we'll have 1 or 2 EVM chains, we'll have Osmosis. Let's then look at the activity on our platform between those two different things. And then we can decide what, because who knows what we're going to see based on what our users want that might be different than what's out in the general market. But at least point being, we'll have more data to make the decision. Okay. Highlander?
Please. Yeah, I had a couple things. One, something I don't see on the list that we can do as a DAO now that I've always been really passionate about is privacy. We've been seeing this a lot. A lot of requests for it. Monero was actually a lot of hype. It was a really big deal. But what I think is more practical for us is a native CoinJoin implementation, in-app mixing. I also want us to consider lighter integrations as in non-full integrations. What we have just done recently with KeepKey is we just added support for over 700 EVMs via Wallet Connect. We did this by simply bringing in a database of chain IDs. So for just our wallet and our dApp connection, we can use any of these networks through Wallet Connect. I believe with ShapeShift, we could do just basic sending and receiving on any of these networks if we consider a lighter integration and kind of changing the way we integrate. We're also working at KeepKey on a generalized Tendermint implementation. I'd love to see this in both the native wallet as well, where we can support just Wallet Connect v2 via Kepler, and the native wallet could then use all the assets on Osmosis. App.osmosis supports Wallet Connect v2, and that's what we're looking for in KeepKey is just in one swoop, getting all the Tendermint coins, and we just got all the EVMs in one swoop. I believe if we consider lighter integrations that we can get all these things done in a much lighter way. But yeah, just wanted to mention those.
One thing to what John was saying too. I think it's an important thing to note that it's not been easy to get your assets into the Cosmos and stuff. Like you had to go through like Atom and stuff like that. There's not a lot of on-off ramping and stuff. And if we have that capability built in, it becomes, like he said, like a place where people go to then be able to put more TV out into that ecosystem. Now, it's a roll of dice to see if that's what happens. But I think that, as someone who was introduced to the paddle zones and stuff and plays around a little bit with it, it's not always easy, having to go, get Atom and then go switch in. Now, if you have like Axlar or another bridge or something, and we have the capabilities of swapping into that and utilizing that within our app, I think it creates a place where people want to come to then explore that a little bit more.
Yeah, well said. I remember in our conversation with the Osmosis team, one of their biggest pain points they were saying is like the IBC bridging in their UX, and we obfuscated the bridge in our implementation of it. And if we can do that for all of the Osmosis assets, if we integrate them fully, that would be just a much better UX. But yeah, I agree with you that just getting in and out is a big, and they said that it is their biggest pain point.
That's a good point. Thanks. Highlander, thanks for bringing up the Wallet Connect aspect. That's another thing to think about, and I'm not quite sure. I know we have Wallet Connect v2 as part of the things that we're planning over the next 3 months, and part of the reason for that is that v1 is going to be sunset at some point. We'll see how well they actually hit that schedule, but that's part of the plan. But yeah, so even before we support all these EVMs and all these Cosmos zones, there is a path, and I think KeepKey's exploring that path to be able to let users still interact with those ecosystems with our wallets from our interface and confirm transactions even before we support the native chain. It's obviously not the best experience because they won't see any of the balances or any of that transaction history in our interface, but it is a path to give users the ability to use all these EVMs, use all these Cosmos zones, and I guess I'm not entirely sure where it comes from. I think you still need to have some other sort of node infrastructure that gives you the blockchain data. But that is a path that KeepKey's exploring and something to consider. And it might not be, again, it's one of those things that we're already planning to do Wallet Connect v2. KeepKey's going to have an implementation. It might be one of those things that's not a lot of lift, but we can get some data from and still at least give users access to it. Not natively in our UI, but at least not make it so that if the user wants to go use this dApp, they have to go switch over to Kepler and migrate all their stuff, and we lose a user. So appreciate you bringing that up, Highlander. And it's one of those things that KeepKey's working on, so we can see how it works out there too, and decide if we want to, do the lift and in our own app.
Does anybody have any ideas or anything you want to bring forward that we haven't considered or that isn't listed here?
One more crazy idea, just while we're here. Yeah. So Rohek actually mentioned this idea just the other day for like a P2P integration. So we have these fiat on and off ramps. I don't know if there's what the protocols look like these days. There used to be, does anyone remember like the Bitcoin with that local Bitcoins, that app where you could basically go and it's like Craigslist for like buying and selling Bitcoin with cash. Anyways, I don't know if anyone's done a fully decentralized version of that. And we will have a fully decentralized app that again could potentially be available to people all around the world. One crazy idea is like a decentralized local Bitcoin, decentralized P2P marketplace, basically, where people can make these offers. Like we could do decentralized ratings and reviews and stuff. Maybe one day it turns into the decentralized Silk Road. I don't know, but it's it's something to think about. It's probably, I wouldn't put it as a priority over the next 3 to 6 months, but it's something to think about. And maybe for the second half of the year, it's one of those like very far out wild ideas, but it's also one of those things that could solve a very big problem and that we could be in a good position to solve. So just figured I'd share that because he gave the opportunity.
So Diggy, did you have something that you were hoping for? Like, are you looking for consensus here? Is this?
Yeah, I'm looking for consensus for this first phase. It may or may not be 3 months. And like you said, this is not exhaustive. There are some. This is just the features we've identified, but there are other things that we're working on in flight. So I need to include those here. But essentially, we're just trying to get alignment on phase 1 so that we can put up a proposal to the community on the roadmap. And again, 3 months, that's a rough estimate. It might be 4. But again, we want to work on phase 1, monitor and track the results, and then use that to start informing phase 2.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that. So is there, oh, Tyler, are you raising your hand?
I don't know if it would be like an additional roadmap. It's been on my mind a lot lately. Marketing for a while, but we had like a really successful campaign around creating a splash page for our fiat operations. And so right now we kind of got everything building into one app right now, and all these different things for a one-stop shop for all of this. But I think we're kind of maybe gatekeeping that a little bit, and there's inventive ways in which we can either white label or segment different versions of the things we're already really good at in isolated presentable fashions, just like this fiat bridge. So if we wanted to have a Thor swap one-page thing, we already have all the guts of that, and we could make a front end so people could be using ShapeShift, having to go to our splash page and connect the wallet, and really focus all these individually unique features at the communities that are interested in them, without having to have the buy-in for using ShapeShift even. Eventually, we can have the hookups. So after you've done your thing on your trade, on your stake, on whatever it is, you can play at the ShapeShift dashboard and secretly have you now at ShapeShift.com, where you can get exposure to the rest of it. But I think we've got all these unique feature sets that we're really only thinking about as like a app store or a desktop thing, but really all of them isolated in themselves can be serviced as a package of something to someone else. So I don't know how much of that would take that disrupt our current roadmap, or if it's something we kind of test in all versions. I know the fiat thing was a first start of it, but yeah, it's been on my mind that we should.
That's well said. And yeah, I agree. It's actually one of the things we were recently just talking about, improving just the new user experience. One of the first goals actually is to kill the splash screen. We're going to drop the users right into like a welcome experience inside the app. And then to your point, not gatekeep, that won't keep the app at all. And then if we can really focus like the DeFi earn section, and to your point, maybe there's an opportunity where we could have a standalone for just like the savers vaults that we really push. yeah, there's definitely some opportunity there. And some of that sounds like if it's all like front end stuff, we can talk about it with marketing, but it sounds like a lot of that could be beard oil. But yeah, no, that's great. And we're starting to think along the same lines.
I guess I like the roadmap as it's presented now. And what I sort of want to implore us to think about is the second phase of the roadmap and how we can like have a loose idea of what we might want to do. So then we can start running tests now. So instead of saying, oh, like that's 3 months from now, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. It'd be really cool if we could say, hey, like these are like 5 things we might want to do. And then maybe have, prod and marketing get together and design ways that we can just pull our current users and determine a current fit for that based on our, like what we have. So like, I think I was talking to Willie and he was talking about whatever company or something. Bitfract. There we go. Yeah, he's talking about Bitfract. He's like, yeah, that's a super lean way to just test users. And they clicked on it, and instead of taking it, it's like, oh, like do this, click on it. Instead of it taking them to the actual feature, it just said, oh, you signed up for the beta, right? Or like this feature is coming soon. And so maybe we identify, 5 of these Cosmos zones or whatever, and you see, okay, how many people are actually clicking on this button, and they click on it and it says, oh, feature might be coming soon, or like there might be some way to just have no engineering to then pull users to say, hey, like, we're seeing current traffic, and then from there be able to easily pivot, based on our current usage. I think that might be a super smart thing for us to even think about. And maybe that's not the solution, but something along those lines to say, hey, like, this is where users currently want. And then from there, build based on that. Yeah.
I think Highlander had something to say on Zoom.
GM Bam, if you'd like to ask a question here, go ahead. Or share your insights. So Highlander's hand was also up again. So when I get both these folks unmuted, I saw them muted again. If you'd like to speak, just a reminder, if you're on the Zoom call, if you'd like to speak, just put your hand up and we'll make sure we get you unmuted.
Okay, so in thinking about just moving forward here, there's a specific request, which is just phase 1, which would take 3 to 4 months. I mean, officially, it's got to go to the community and be voted on there, but I'm hearing Diggy looking for, is there anybody here in this room that would object if she posted a proposal with that as the phase 1 roadmap for these first couple months of 2023? Okay, I think, is that?
Yeah, and I think we'll add things that are.
Very quickly to add to that, the content's important. I think what's even more important on the topic of yesterday of focus and limited resources is what's not in that, and being able to say no. Like the partnership flow is, the partnership noise has dried up dramatically, which has been great, but we've still got some lingering stuff like the whatever, which I think something we have to get better at as a DAO. Right? Whatever, and things like that. Whatever widget. Yeah. Saying no to that stuff, right? Like if we don't have a priority, we have no priorities. And if we decide on that stuff that we want to focus on, we should focus on that and just kind of say no to every other distraction that comes up.
Wherever's a good example too, because that was one that it could be an example of one of the.
Curious, I know Wherever's not quite live, but it's very, very close. And I'm curious, that does seem like it might have been one of the better external contributions we had, where we're getting like a pretty great full feature that's unique and didn't require us to build it from scratch. And it seems like it might have gone pretty well. So yeah, I agree. We got to say no to some stuff, but that seems like the type of stuff that might be a good example for us to still consider if that pops up. But yeah, we need that healthy skepticism, and we need to make sure that we're weighing it against all of our other priorities, basically, like how much work do we think it's going to take for ops engineering, and is that amount of work worthwhile and more important than all these other things that we have to consider. One other thing too that we don't really have that is in that list is like usability improvements too. And so I want to make sure that I think there does seem like there's a healthy consensus around not just like, oh, let's just go rush to the next feature, but let's make sure that we're really polishing what we have, that everything works and it's bug free. Little things like, I know we are already close with this, but like when you refresh, not having to enter the password on your ShapeShift native wallet or unlock your keep key every time until you're signing a transaction. Those little things definitely, we don't want to forget about those either.
Yeah, I'll make sure that this looks.
Sweet. Who had their hand up first? I'll do Giant Kin, or sorry, I'll do Gray Machine, and then okay, Kyler and then Gray Machine.
I just wanted to ask a question to kind of piggyback off of what DeFi just said, and to honor and respect what isn't listed in there. Do we have a repo of all of the things that are still slightly mid-flight? The yachts, the wherevers, because I don't want there to be like this elephant in the room that we still are committed to these things that we didn't have on there. Do we know all of the things that we still need to close up, and do we need to have like a cleanup list or a like shit or get off the pot meeting or some form of deciding how we move forward on any last things we're still mid-flight on before we step into this new roadmap?
Didn't you say you were going to add flight items?
Yeah, but like to his point, like there are like well, wherever and stuff, but yeah, we should definitely. I don't know if we should figure it out. But yeah, we should also maybe we should just sync up and make sure we represent anything that's still dangling and see if there is anything we can potentially cut. Yeah, it's done. We're just waiting for the referral link to work. I don't think that one is one we should cut out because it's just done and just waiting behind a flag. Yeah, maybe we should just turn it on because we're not going to get credit for those sales. But yeah, we could. Yeah.
I think I kind of like not turning it on because it really lights the fire under their ass to figure out that referral system. Yeah, and then it's not going to add any revenues. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I can take it as the takeaway. I'll go through and update this list to include everything. And then we can sync up and we can all go over it and just make sure that it's accurate representation. And then to your point, if there's anything we can flush out or throw away.
To Highlander's point, I really like the Wallet Connect V2. Like, to be clear, the V2, not the part 2 bit. Like, for the data-driven purpose, we get a lot of leverage from it, right? We get to see what people want to use, and if there is stuff that is tremendously popular or like that we get good feedback from, we then can more tightly integrate that stuff natively. Yeah, we have to be pretty clear about the messaging and positioning and stuff. But like, if you go and fuck around with this random EVM chain, it's like you're not going to be able to see it. Like, you know, you can go and connect it with the wallet, but it's not going to be that a whole full service experience within ShapeShift. But it can be really good to be able to track that and see what is popular to capitalize on those opportunities, and let people go and use other dApps and protocols that we don't tightly integrate. That's probably something that's not like as highly prioritized as it could be, because it gives us data. If we prioritize that earlier, it gives us good data earlier, and then we can use that to inform decisions later.
Okay. And Age is behind you too, and then I want to wrap up.
Yeah. I just wanted to point out, like, it's just kind of an observation, and for us to think about. I know features and roadmaps and all that are essential and are driven by user data research and all that kind of stuff. I just want to point out an observation as somebody that's come from a slightly different industry. Is like, I've never been in a place where so few people working on the product actually use the product. And I know all of our decisions should be data driven, but I think Pastico's had a small discussion about this, about how little we actually all, I mean, I'm sure we all use it in bits and pieces, but it doesn't, like in my one-on-one conversations with people, it's not like, yeah, I'm on app.shapeshift for, well, and there's a reason, right? It's just lacking the features. And it, as much as we try to think about what's going to drive revenue, what's going to, like, I think we should not be afraid to make it, product that this room wants it to be. It has the features that this, because as Scott was saying, like, it's a smart group of people and we can make the decisions pretty well. I mean, we should certainly take user feedback, but there's no reason it shouldn't be a product that we all use and love. It's kind of like working for Lyft, but preferring to use the Uber app. Because like, well, and Uber's actually, you know, like, and I know we're getting there. There's a lot of work to get there, but I want to kind of push, just challenge the thought to make it an app that we love and that comes through our passion, not exclusively just like polls and, you know, profit and all that kind of stuff. I think all that stuff will come through our passion for the product. So that's all.
Sorry, last thing. I was thinking about this, and I know we were talking yesterday about making data-driven decisions and like having, you know, qualified learning based on decisions. And I think one thing that would really benefit us in this instance is, as much as it's difficult to project how much engineering time it would take to implement one of these features, or like, oh, estimating how much time is left in engineering to clean up what we have left, it'd be nice to just throw some numbers out there and say, hey, we guess this is it. And then maybe we revisit that every 2 weeks. It's like, oh, like the spec has changed, or the scope has changed, or like, this is how long it actually took. So that way in 3 months, we could say, hey, like our projections were off by, you know, 800 hours, or like we were totally off. It took way longer. And so that's like another column. I sort of wish we could add, even if it was a total guess, like a shot in the dark, just to then benchmark, like, oh, we guessed this, it took this. And then from there, just hopefully being able to refine, okay, it takes us this long to implement these features. And of course, I'm not an engineer, so I don't know how any of that works, but it'd be really cool to make sure that, you know, we keep that in mind when we're giving engineering these tasks to clean up, so we're not overloading them. We can just sort of make sure that we allocate appropriately.
The hardest thing with engineering estimates is like the amount of stuff we have in progress. Like, you know, the rest of the team will attest to this. It's like, it's the context switching, it's the like finishing stuff without the minimum lovable products. You know, like I think the way we do stuff is you prioritize a smaller number of things, and if you want to do something quicker, you do a cut down scope of something at a high quality, not like a fully fledged thing at low quality. Like that, users hate low quality shit. They, you know, it's important to get things out to them, but we've just still got too many things in progress. It's one of the hardest things, right? Like you're switching between like wherever and back and forth and this and back and forth and like, you know, 5, 6, 10. What was it, like 15 epics we had in progress after the migration that we were trying to wrap up? Yeah.
Each engineer.
Yeah, we had 15 things in progress. Like it's as a business that doesn't make sense, right?
I did not know that much of the figure. Wow.
I wanted to ask about cycle times. Because we did it before, but now stuff with like cycle time, it's a different game here, Easter egg. And that doesn't offset what you just said about the context switching, but way more likely to be accurate on estimating a single epic. You know, if we know there's 20 stories with 4 people, their time for taking these 2 days or whatever to come up with a good guess.
I want to pause that, and maybe that's something that we can go into. I just want to keep moving us forward here. And so I think we got the main thing that we need out of the roadmap discussion for Diggy. So what I want to do is take another quick break. Like, let's see, it's 41. So let's meet back at 10 till. So it's just 9 minutes for, I have to use the bathroom. And in case anybody else does, then we're going to come back. We'll do the conflict introduction, which is not going to take super long. So lunch is going to be a little bit later. We're not going to break right at noon. It's going to be 10 or 15 after probably. But we didn't start till 10. Then we'll do lunch. And then that actually makes a nice segue. We come back from lunch and we start working on the rest of the agenda. I'll lead us through building the agenda how we move on from here. And we could also just do half a day
And then tomorrow morning, we build the agenda for, you know what I mean? It's not like we have to build it out for the whole rest.
Let's do like conflict resolution before, right before these, so nobody
All right, so I'll see you back here at 10 till.
Thank you, guys.
Recording stopped.
I'll be back.
Recording in progress.
I had been thinking about this for a couple of months, and I think maybe something that is fundamental at the DAO that's caused a few issues, a bit of friction, some operational inefficiencies across the board, has been, but I think we don't have in place two things. One, a proper conflict resolution framework. Because of the nature of the organization and the way that we interact without any managerial oversight, right? That's great on one hand, right? It gives us a lot of flexibility. We've cut out, a lot of the middle management bureaucracy. That wasn't a jab at you in any way. At the same time, the responsibility that usually was taken up by that segment of the organization has also been decentralized, and that's also all of our responsibility. So us being, primarily a collection of people that are at the implementation layer, probably don't have a tremendous amount of experience between us in conflict resolution and the managerial side of things, right? And so I've noticed that people being on average more conflict averse than not would prefer not to engage in direct person-to-person confrontation when disagreements at non-trivial disagreements arise. And so because of that, I think, we have, not necessarily by choice, but in effect, come to resolve disagreements in ways that I've found to be quite a bit less efficient than they could be otherwise, right? So I think there's been a tendency at the organization for things that could be sorted out with a minor, uncomfortable conversation to fester and only become worthwhile to deal with when there's huge problems that could have been avoided, have the situations been dealt with before. So I think the two things that I would like all of us to take from the next workshop, it's one, some implementation details about how to resolve conflicts amicably and in a way that minimizes the discomfort. There's always going to be some discomfort with direct confrontation when you don't see eye to eye and have to come to some cooperative resolution to move forward. The discomfort is avoidable, but I think is unavoidable, but I think it can be minimized, right? So I hope we have some implementation details about how to do that. And then two, I think we need to understand that all of us have a responsibility to engage in those conflicts and push through the disagreements as soon as they're made obvious to us. And I think in doing that, we can minimize the inefficiencies due to operational friction and move forward as quickly and efficiently as possible. We don't have a lot of time left, and we've got to make the best of it in order to see through the other side of this thing. So if we're all in agreement about that being valuable, I think we can get a lot from it.
Thanks, Nick. All right. So, cat call.
I don't think I can do that.
All right, so yeah, I'm gonna walk through this process, and there's a handout for this that I did not create. I learned this from some other people, a couple of women who I really admire and do this training all over the country, and they don't have an official certified trainer program, but they have given me a blessing to go out and teach this and include it in any of the curriculums that I do, which I include a lot. And so I have found it really useful when you have conflict, and hopefully you will too. And then after I introduce the steps, there's 5 steps. I'll also have some suggestions on how you might be able to, where it might be appropriate to use this, but I think that will all make more sense if I just walk you through it first. And I'm going to use this. Is this clear enough in the view of the Zoom camera? Okay, so, and I also, they, these women, Nancy and Jules are their name, and they call themselves crafted leadership. What they have called this approach, they call it a, oh, that's a terrible pen. I need another black Sharpie. That one could just be thrown away. They call it a collaborative approach to conflict, which I really like. Okay, and it's 5 steps. So step 1 is just to have a conflict, yes. Describe the behavior that you don't like. And what's important here, right? So if there's a conflict, and this is not necessarily just like a disagreement on some things, right? This is not a collaborative approach to disagreement. This is like if you have a conflict with the way that someone has behaved, something that they've done, right? If you're the roadmap, there was no real conflict about the roadmap in our discussions, right? There was more about trying to agree on what features more important. In some ways you could call it conflict, but this wouldn't apply to that kind of level of conflict or disagreement, right? So there's someone did something that you didn't like, they said something that you didn't think was appropriate or fair or something, or it could happen like on an engineering team, someone could merge a dangerous PR that wound up causing a production issue, right? Or something like that. Something like that are some examples. So you want to describe the behavior, you want to get really clear about it as facts, as something that a video camera would record, such that if you were to go to the person you had conflict with and describe what it is you didn't like, they couldn't argue about it. So like, for example, what you couldn't say is, you are always late to meetings. That is, always is a subjective term. You can't be, you just can't say whether that's true or not. What you could say is, on the meetings on Monday, you were late to both the meetings this past week on Monday and Tuesday, the product meeting and the inter-team meeting, right? That would be described as a fact that they wouldn't be able to argue. And you're doing this not just to make it unarguable to them, but for your own self. I've gone through this approach before and then not even approach the person I had conflict with because I just got clear about it myself, right? So the first person, when you do this, you're doing it for yourself. So this is very clear. It's listed as fact. Number 2, step 2 is how did that make you feel? How do you feel about that? Given that this happened, how do you feel? And I'm actually getting clear about my language here. How did that make you feel? Nothing actually makes us feel anywhere. We're the ones who make us feel a certain way. Now, something could happen and then I felt this way, right? So I think it's better to think about it that way than someone did something and that made you feel a certain way. But mostly here, this is an emotion. This is some kind of feeling word. Frustrated, you could use that. It's a little, I call that like a lower level emotion. Things like sad, mad, resentful, stuff like that is a little bit closer to something that I would think you would aim for here. Ron?
Using an emotion.
Wait, ask that question again.
Using an emotion wheel.
Would using an emotion wheel help with that? Sure, bring up like give me a list of emotion words, and you could look through a list of emotion words and.
Yeah, there's ones that will help you get more specific about how you're feeling.
Yeah, Ron was asking about emotion wheels or anything that helps you get any other tool that you use to get clear about how something makes you feel, what emotion you're feeling. I think that's great. Number 3, and this is a really important one. The story, I guess I'll say I'm using you instead of I here. The story you made up is, okay, so this is really interesting. And this gets, when you start describing the behavior, like, and then, so for example, you're always late to meetings, and when you came into the meeting on Monday, you were really mad. That is not a fact, right? That is a story that you made up. Now, you were late to the meeting and your face was red and your hair was a mess, whatever. You start describing certain things. And then the story I made up is that you were mad, right? Now, that is something that fits in here, because if you think about it, if you say you were mad at me, they could say, no, I wasn't mad at you. And you might not be right. They might not have been mad at you. But if you say, you were late, you look like this, I made the story, I made up the story that you were mad at me. Now you're like sharing with them what goes on for you, and they can't say, you did not think I was mad at you, because that's the story that you made up, right? This is your story. So
There are a few other phrases there that you can do, right?
there's a few other phrases that you can use, like, yeah, I mean, you could.
The story I told myself.
The story I told myself.
The story I told myself, the meaning I made, right? The story that I made up. Yeah, there's a couple different ways to think about it at that level. Yes. Okay, then number 4 is also gets interesting. Your part in the conflict. And then you complete that sentence. So the idea here is that every conflict has 2 sides, right? All relationships are for both people that are involved. So what was your part in creating the conflict? It can be challenging to figure this out, and actually all of this can be challenging at times. So I always recommend, and I've even already spoken to someone here at the retreat this week about this, that the first time you do it, it's really hard to actually, it's harder than you think to get clear about this. So helpful to always review it with somebody else that can challenge you about what you think something like, well, that fact sounds like a story to me, right? I don't agree that's a fact. To get that from somebody else before you feel like you've gotten clarity on this and decide to talk to the person you're in conflict with. And so it's a good idea to do that. And to this person, I offered me and to everybody that's here, if you decide that the first time you're doing this and you're not clear, or you just want to check it with somebody, reach out to me on, everyone knows me on, in Discord, knows my DM, can DM me. So I'm making myself available to help you walk through this at least 1 or 2 times if you want. And there's plenty of other people that you could get good help from too. And then the last step is your request to the other person. Like, what would you like different from the other person, or in general, what would you like? Mostly it's from the other person, right? This is the behavior that you didn't like, so you probably want something different about that behavior, is the idea. Does this in general make sense to people? And what questions are there? Questions are great.
Can you formulate an entire example from?
I could, but let me see. H.
Yeah. At the top level, it's like just try to identify like how my perceptions of it. Like this many times, it's like I identify this problem.
Yeah. So H was kind of like at a high level, right? This is like, it's not just, hey, I've got a conflict with you, you need to stop doing this, right? That is not super, well, it's better than not saying anything, you could argue. It still is not, it's not as helpful as getting super clear on what it is that your conflict is about. And you getting clear on the facts versus your stories, understanding how, you feel, and then claiming some part of it. So you're connecting, you're doing a lot of figuring your own stuff out here. And then there is a solution that so it's hey, here's a problem that I noticed. Here's how it has impacted me that I see. And this is my request to you. Ron?
For the top level, if we identify multiple behaviors.
This is a great question. PTT asked if there's multiple things that you don't like. Yes, I think this is what you were saying. You want one, if they've done 5 things that you don't like, you go through this 5 times. And then you can decide which one to approach them about if you want to approach them. But yeah, you don't glump them together when you're doing this, because then you can see we get really specific here. We really concretize something about what's going on, which really helps us stay away from. That's one of the biggest challenges particularly like in organizations and like performance management, right? Is like, your code's just not good quality, right? We just don't like your code. It's really, that is not useful. To be able to point, here's the examples, this is what we don't like, this is why it was a problem. The specificity and this kind of stuff really helps. And I say like in business and in organizations, but it totally goes for marriage too. Like to come at your spouse or your partner with generalities about what you don't like about them, that's not such a good idea.
Your quiche was low quality.
It made me feel sad.
The thing I noticed is like all these are basically, I was thinking it's like, okay, like none of these are using like every one of these is an I statement until the end of like I would like you to. I think
That's right.
Step in my mind where it's like,
Yeah.
it's like I did this, I perceived this, I did this, I would like you, and then I think step 5 is what an actual other person, like an actual request.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, 2, 3, and 4, there's no, well, in the story you made up, if you might include, you've made up something about them. But yeah, this is all like totally focused on you. 1 is what you've seen or heard, whatever that you don't like. Yeah, and 5 is the request to them. It's a lot of, this requires a lot of reflection, which is very helpful when you're dealing with conflict. And I actually walked 2 different clients through this just in my sessions on Monday, right? 2 days ago. And one of them is not even, it kind of has figured out a different path forward rather than bringing their conflict directly to that person. But he wouldn't have got to that point if he didn't go through this process. So I think Nick said, right, if we could do something the moment we realize there's something off, if my suggestion is if you go through this, that does not mean you are committed to approaching the person about your conflict, right? But if this is as soon as you realize that there's some conflict going on, if you work through this, it can just show what the next steps are. You can get clarity. Does not mean that you need to escalate the conflict.
Conversely, I think if there's an expectation, right, when approached, they'll take people off.
Yeah, so, right, that's a good point too. So if you decide to approach the other person about this, there's actually like a step 0.5, which is, hey, Apotheosis, I have some conflict with you. I'd like to find a couple minutes to talk to you about it. Or, hey, I've got some conflict with you. Is now a good time to go through it? Or when could we go through this for a couple minutes? So if there's this expectation in this organization that that approach is acceptable and that you know this is what the other person is going to go through rather than start blaming the shit out of you for something, conflict becomes easier to deal with, right? If this is our expectation when someone says, I have some conflict with you, can I tell you about it? I think that makes things better.
And you know it's coming from a good place.
And you, right, exactly. You know it's coming from a good place. The intent is problem solving. And I think you're not going to be blamed by the other person. You know that they have done some reflection on it. So, because that's a lot of the problem, right? I mean, I think a lot of the reasons we shy away from conflict is because it's two people who know what they want out of the conflict, blaming the shit out of each other. And it's ugly. It's very easy. It's a slippery slope and it can get nasty quick before you even realize it.
But conflict is inevitable. It happens to every organization. And so if we can better deal with it and get it earlier on, because it's going to happen and we don't address it, it just festers. We've definitely seen that happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a great approach. I love the request piece too. I think that's the part that I would never have thought of otherwise, or maybe it's easy to forget about, but ultimately, like, what's the point in sharing this if you don't have a clear request? And it really forces you to think of like, okay, you have this problem, but like, what's actually a solution, an actionable solution?
Yeah, the request, Willie is pointing out that this request at the beginning is important. And Adam.
I was just going to say, would you use the word conflict necessarily in that? I would probably say like, hey, we're chat and have a few minutes, instead of like putting this conflict word in their head, especially if they can't talk right then and now they're like maybe getting anxious about it for hours.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of the times you do this in some kind of designated touch point or one-on-one. But I do think before you actually dive into this, so even if it's not like, hey, can we chat for a few minutes? As soon as you know you've got them for whatever it is, 10 or 15 minutes, hey, I have some conflict that I want to address with you. So don't leave them. I think, Adam, your point is don't leave them hanging and like your meeting is now set up for a day later and they're like, oh shit, there's some conflict. And maybe even you are nervous about doing this with somebody, right? So sure, get the time scheduled however works for you, but right before you go into step one, you do just preface that. I've even said to other people who know it, like Eric's not here, but I did this with Eric once, the backend centralized ShapeShift, right? So I just told him, hey, I've got some collaborative conflict with you that I want to address. And he knew what it was because he had been through the same training. And so it was, and even though it took a day or two to get on the books, it was not like, it didn't have this.
It would definitely depend on the person.
Yeah, it depends on the person. And what I would like to see is it'd be great if we built the culture such that, right, if you have the culture of it, then people come into the culture. If this is an expected part of the culture, you'd be amazed. People are much more, I don't want to say people are pliable, but like the way people behave has a lot more to do with the situation that they're in than the individual than you would think. There's this great, it's like a college textbook called The Person in the Situation. That is just experiment after experiment of showing how people behave more. It's the conditions of the situation that impact the way people behave more than who it is that you put into the situation. That's kind of the whole idea of culture. And yes, still who it is important. I have one other, well, maybe more than one other point, but these are great comments and questions from people. And I know we still want to like walk through an example too.
I just want to say like this type of stuff I reject from my core naturally personality flaw or something. I went played along with that one of these at ShapeShift and
Yeah.
And it's absolutely changed my life now. Just work, home, and it's like you said.
I'm gonna have you say that into the mic.
Yeah, so just naturally, I completely, I don't know, I reject these things. I inwardly feel like I already know how to deal with people. I don't need anyone to tell me how to do this. I went and played along because you brought me in and basically pushed me in to sign me up for it. I played along and it's absolutely like changed my life. At work, we use this. I participated in it with you, without you several times. But at home, with, you know, and it's like you said, 90% of the time, if I've like gone to a common place, thought about it, you don't even need to approach it. It becomes like a much friendlier, not such a big like hostile confrontation.
Awesome. Thank you for thank you for sharing that, Adam. So, okay, we'll go through a really kind of basic example here first, and then I'll make some closing points, a little bit more like bringing it to the context of ShapeShift. So let's see. Let's just I started talking about this like late to meetings, and not muting yourself when you should, right? So, right, the behavior I don't like. So I noticed in the last meeting that you are not muting yourself when you're not speaking, and you've got dogs barking in the background. And then you could even, if you want, you could even say, well, actually this would be in the story. So yeah, in the last meeting on Monday, you have not muted yourself, there's dogs barking and it distracts people. And even when we ask you to mute, you're not muting. So we have to like moderate mute, right? That makes me feel mad. The story I make up is that you don't care about this team. The team's not important to you. And that you're, yeah, the story I make up is that you just don't care enough to pay attention to us and to what's going on. My part in the conflict, well, actually the also story I make up is that this has happened multiple times in the past, and I'm including this in the story because I can't like say explicitly when, but this is, I have a picture that this has happened multiple times in the past. My part in creating this conflict is that I haven't talked to you about it beforehand. I've let it linger until now. And my request is that you pay more, you mute yourself. If you're not speaking in a team meeting, that you mute yourself before we have to moderate mute. That's like a super simple example. But even in like complex situations, you really like, you narrow this thing down where you say it in 2 minutes, right? And when I had this continue, and hopefully Eric doesn't care that I'm saying that I had this conflict with him, but even there, it was more complex. And when I ran through it, it took less than 2 minutes. And the thing that was really interesting, what really like, that was a big learning point for me, because I had learned this before from Nancy and Jules and had used it. But ultimately what my request for Eric was, and I'm finding that it goes to this kind of place more and more, was to better understand why he acted in a, why he made a certain decision. Right? It was not that I wanted the decision to be different. It was just to better understand your thought process on that decision. And that led to he and I having this whole conversation that was like, not what I thought, not what, and it just like, it really like things really shifted after that for me anyway. So so I kind of have this mantra that I think about with conflict. When I'm in conflict with people, I feel like I'm ready to approach them when the conflict turns into curiosity. Right? That is like a marker for me. It's not that it always goes there. Sometimes the request stays hard and firm and there's just something that you want different. But if the conflict turns into curiosity about an opportunity for me to learn something about the person, about the situation, then I'm totally ready to talk to the person about that. And I still go through this so that I don't just ask them, hey, can you tell me more about why you made that decision? I still go through the context and I share what was going on with me, because I have found that I then get more from them about what was really going on for them in the decision, rather than some rote surface level answer. Okay, does that all make sense? Yeah. So the last thing I want to leave people with is that thinking about, like, where would you use this at ShapeShift? And I think that there's some probably, I think you could use it a lot of different places, but one thing is if you're about to post something in the forum or a proposal that impacts somebody else, and you have not yet talked to them, had a one-on-one conversation with them about, and the forum post or the proposal is in some way, can be made, can have the meaning of something that you don't like about what they've done. I would suggest that you go through this about how you feel about them, the conflict that you have with them that would make you do a forum post or a proposal before, and then I hope that you could even get to the point where you then approach them about it. And that does not mean that you're looking to resolve the conflict and so that you don't do the forum post. It's just to have some connection, so you have a little bit of, you have some one-on-one conversation. And even if it's just the request is somewhere in here, right? I've got this forum that feel so strongly about this that I'm going to put this up on the forum, but I wanted to connect with you about it first. I wanted to share something, about it with you before I do that. And the request could be, I'd like to know your thoughts. It could be something along those kind of lines. Maybe it's like, hey, if something were different, I wouldn't do this forum post, and you could be looking for that. But even if not that, that would be that you at least really consider doing this before you take that action. And I think if we did that, I think some of the drama that happened over these past couple months, I think would not have been as dramatic. I think there would have been some drama. I don't know that there would have been any way around, but it got pretty dramatic there for like an unsustainable level of drama that we had. And so another example, I did this with Hunt. I did not go through it with him, but I did through my conflict with him about some of the things that he said about me in the public forum. I went through this just so I could get clear on why am I so pissed off right now.
It would have been great if you had taken that approach with the people that you have issues with and just had that conversation.
Yeah, could you imagine if this was in the culture and Hunt, even if it was ingrained in the culture, I'm not certain Hunt would have been able to do it. I just don't know if he would have been able to maintain. He had some level of maturity. I don't know if it would have maintained for enough time to go through this and approach people about it, but I think it would have made a difference.
So let's say hypothetically, something there's in the future, any of us know that we see conflict happening in the forum or in Discord. Would it make sense for us to be like, hey, for any of us to say, hey, publicly, I think I see it looks like there's some conflict here. I feel there's some conflict here. I would strongly recommend that who I think the conflict is between. You guys do this approach. Is that the way to do it, or do we reach out to the individuals and say, hey, I think you should approach each other? What would you recommend?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I think it's kind of situational. Yeah. Wait, hold on. I'm going to give you the mic, but first, so people who are on Zoom, Willie asked, so if one of us notices conflict between two other people somewhere in the DAO space, Should we approach them through a DM? Should we say in the public channel, hey, I think you might want to go through the collaborative approach to conflict? And Pasta had some thoughts on that.
I would say I think it depends on the nature of the conflict, right? So obviously, if it's a personal thing between two people, I think trust that they're going to get it sorted. But if it's something at the organizational level, I'll give an example. Like I was aware that there was significant conflict on the marketing team at the time that they had 3 workstream leaders. What I said at the time was, well, I don't know what's going on in marketing anyway, so we'll let them sort it out. I don't think that was the correct approach in hindsight. I think that at least, no, to a strong degree, you abdicated my responsibility as an active DAO member. I should have informed myself about what was going on by talking to the participants, because that was something that ended up in governance. And I didn't have sufficient information to feel comfortable voting on the issue because I hadn't participated and tried to figure out what was going on. On the other side of that, right, there's some chance that in talking to the individuals that were embroiled in the conflict, right, maybe those conversations could have had some meaning. Maybe my perspective could have been useful, all of that. But I think, in decentralized organizations, you can leverage upper management to resolve those sorts of things. We don't have that anymore, so nobody's going to do it for us, right? If the organizational issues are not resolved at the individual level, they're not going to get resolved. And so I think the responsibility is incumbent on us all, right, to utilize this not only to sort out our own conflicts in a way that prioritizes problem solving and is non-confrontational, not non-confrontational, you know what I mean, amicable, but also to do our part in helping resolve organization-wide conflicts to the extent that we can.
Was there as a tool right off the bat, like if I have a conflict with someone, I can go through this exercise by myself and then with that individual. At what point do you think it's important? I mean, some conflicts just require a third party to mediate. So like at what point would you suggest that we have that, and is there like a way we can turn that into some sort of process?
Well, so that's a good question. And I'll stand in front of it. So I think that's a good question. And right now, I think that whoever goes through this, if this is your first or second time, get someone else to go through it with and get some feedback from them. I mean, it may be that you don't even want to approach the person unless there's someone else with you. And then certainly if you go through this process and you approach them and it like totally blows up and something needs to be done, then maybe there's a third party involved. But I would say that to start with, get some third party help just so you can get clear about what's going on for you. And then you can figure that out.
I know you had a very quick example that you kind of put up there as far as like individuals maybe possibly having conflict, and then an individual thinking of doing like a forum post or something public. And I see the validness in what you were trying to get across. Just to be a advocate, as normal I am. In some cases, and definitely dependent on individuals and their maturity level and their approach to certain things. Saying to someone, I'm about to do a public post, you better talk to me. It's almost like a threat. You know what I mean? So you got to be careful to word it in a way that's not.
Okay, so I'm glad you asked that question or made that statement. I think if you're thinking about doing a forum post or a proposal, you go through this. When you approach the other person, I don't think you even need to say, like when you first go through it, leave that out, right? But then ultimately at some point, if you're going to do the forum post or the proposal, I still think like letting that person know.
Yeah, it could kind of almost go into like 3 or something like that, or 4.
Yeah.
3 or 4. Like I was thinking of making a forum post, that's how I was reacting.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can always go through this with them, leave the fact that there's a forum post has been brewing in your mind totally out of it, and then you go through this with them, and then you step away from that, and then you can decide later if you're going to do that. And if you do, then at that point, I don't think you need another meeting with them. I would say if you've already gone through the conflict with them with this, and you still want to do that, then just if you haven't told them one-on-one, tell them in a DM. That's what I would do. Hey, just so you know, I put this up because I feel really strongly about it. And I just wanted to give you the heads up. So they're not surprised by, oh shit, there's a forum post that's kind of calling me out for something because I'm fucking not muting myself on Zoom.
Yeah, no, I just think it's because we work in a remote meeting like this, where it's good to kind of
Yeah.
bring up those things, because those things can be issues that creep in sometimes.
Okay, cool. So that took a little bit longer than I thought. We're at 12:30, so we're gonna break. Maybe if I can get a few people to come help me grill some PB&Js. We're doing PB&Js and pickles and potato chips. Sorry, people on Zoom, I'm sure your mouth is watering right now.
When they can't pick grills
and so we'll take, an hour would be 1:30. Do you want an hour or do you want an hour and 15 minutes? What do people want?
Okay, 1 hour.
1 hour? Okay, gonna come back at 1:30. So people on Zoom, we'll see you back at 1:30. Thanks, everybody.
And what are we doing at 1:30? Are we planning out the rest at that point?
Yeah, we're gonna.
Recording stopped.